Today, I will be covering the missing persons case of young geologist Daniel Robinson, who went missing in the summer of 2021 after leaving his work site in the Arizona desert and has not been seen since. Let's get into it. 25-year-old Daniel Cornelius Robinson was born on January 14, 1997 in Columbia, South Carolina. He is the son of Melissa Edmonds and David Robinson. Daniel comes from a very loving and close-knit family. His family unit is tight. He actually has a sister who lives not too far from him in Phoenix, and the two of them love to go hiking together. They're the pair that likes to do the outdoorsy type of things. He has an older brother as well, who I believe still lives in South Carolina. Their relationship is really close, and he has a super adorable relationship with his mother. You can tell Daniel loves his mom. He would send her text messages just to say, "I love you," call her to check up on her, and they talked very frequently. She actually shared a text message that he sent to her a few days before he went missing, and this was one that she shared with the Red Table Talk during her interview. And it says, "I just want to say I love you, Mom. You raised me strong, and even though I'm going through hardships, I never forget those sacrifices you made for me to reach where I am now. I couldn't have done this without you. Thanks for everything, and I love you for being the best mom I ever had." And he signs it off with a heart. Definitely a loving young man. He had an awesome bond with his father as well. They were very close. They talked to each other 2, sometimes 3 times a week. And it wasn't uncommon that their conversations could last hours at a time. You could just tell Daniel is surrounded by a lot of love. It's just a really refreshing thing to see. All right, just a quick insert here really quickly. Daniel is actually the youngest of 4. So he has twin sisters, not just one in Phoenix where he lives. And I don't know much about the other sister, but I definitely did want to insert this because I want to make sure that you have the information and that it's accurate. Daniel's family describes him as someone who's friendly, always smiling, just a real go-getter. He's got a real magnetic personality. He's the type of person who can just talk to anybody, meet a stranger out in public, and the next thing you know, he's made a friend. That's kind of how everybody describes Daniel. No one has anything negative to say. He's just a real cool person. He's always had a passion for adventure, and he loves to travel. And although he was born with only one of his forearms, he refused to wear prosthetics. He was not having it. And his parents said they tried to get him to use them, but he said, "No, this is me. This is how I was born. This is who I am." And he just wanted to live a full and normal life just like anybody else. He didn't want that to serve as any type of limitation. He felt like if there was something that he wanted to do, he was determined to figure it out. And it's clear that he did. He was a very tenacious young man. He taught himself how to play the French horn. He taught himself how to play the trombone. He played football. He enjoyed weightlifting. He did a lot of things. Like, there's just nothing this kid wasn't willing to try. Definitely a rare breed. And to top it off, Daniel's a very smart young man. He graduated in 2019 from the College of Charleston with a major in archaeology. And after graduation, he landed a job at Matrix New World Engineering in Phoenix, Arizona. And he relocated right away. I'm sure that was very exciting for him because, look, let's face it, a lot of college kids don't land jobs right away out of college. It takes some time. It's a waiting game. You got to search. Sometimes you end up having to go work somewhere else first, and just to know that everything was aligning the right way had to be exciting for him, and I know that it made his parents very proud. He worked in very extreme conditions out in remote areas of the Arizona desert. Sometimes he'd have to travel long distances for work projects, but according to his father, he loved his job, and he really enjoyed the travel and being outside. Daniel was last seen on June 23rd by his coworker Ken Elliott at about 9:15 a.m. local time. The two had met up at a well site located in the Buckeye, Arizona desert near Cactus Road and Sun Valley Parkway. They met up to discuss a drill project that was coming up.
Officers say they are doing targeted searches to try and find Daniel Robinson. He was last seen leaving his job site outside of Buckeye back on June 23rd, and since then has not been seen or heard from.
Now, you have to remember, they're out in the desert. It is hot out there. I mean, temperatures could get as high as 110, sometimes 115 degrees. It could get hot. Elliot said they were having a general conversation, about the weather and about the project they were working on together. He said their conversation started off pretty normal. Though a few minutes later, he reported that Daniel became distracted by something and just started looking off into the distance and, according to him, saying things that didn't make much sense. He also said, and I quote, "He was just looking off in the desert. He had a very, very distant look in his eyes. Whenever he'd turn around again, I would look at him and look into his eyes, but the first thing I thought was maybe it was drugs or something. But his pupils were not dilated. From that standpoint, everything appeared to be normal. Then I thought this was a medical condition or something. I wasn't too sure. I kept watching him, but he kept turning around and looking off into the desert. Then he just turned around and walked back over to his Jeep, and I just assumed he was going to get something out of his vehicle. And he opened the door, got in, sat down, put on a seatbelt, and then he looked at me and just waved at me and backed out and took off." End quote. Daniel drove a 2017 blue-gray Jeep Renegade, similar to this picture here. At first, he assumed that maybe Daniel may have just not been feeling well. But after many hours went by with no word of what Daniel had been up to, he started to worry. And he decided to get in his car and just kind of drive around and see what he could spot. He reported seeing Daniel's Jeep tracks heading west further off into the distant desert. He said at that point he realized something just had to be very wrong. Sometime that evening, one of the employees from Daniel's job paid a visit to his sister to ask if she'd heard from or seen her brother, but she hadn't. And at that point, of course, she became worried, so she called her father, David Robinson, who then reached out to the Buckeye Police Department. But he was told he couldn't yet file an official police report for his missing son. He was going to have to wait an additional 12 hours before doing so. Now, the police department initially told Daniel's father that they were going to send a helicopter out to search for him the next day. Though that effort was canceled the following day, and he was told that it was unauthorized because Daniel is an adult. Yes, even though he went missing on the job, and yes, even though he went missing out in the sweltering hot Arizona desert. The high on the day Daniel went missing, Wednesday, June 23rd, was 108. The high on that Thursday was 109 degrees. And on Friday, the highest temperature was 107. Now, this is excruciating heat to have to endure out in the desert with no apparent shade. Should something happen and a person gets stranded out there without water, it's definitely high risk for a heat stroke. And that's not even including the possibility of just running into somebody dangerous. And there have also been major concerns about the high cartel activity known to traffic that Arizona desert. David decided he wasn't going to wait on the police anymore. He needed to find his son. He immediately packed his things and left his home in Columbia, South Carolina, and headed to Buckeye, Arizona to get some answers. In the meantime, he continued to call his son over and over again, hoping that maybe he would just pick up the phone. But to no avail, he called until it just kind of appeared that the phone may have just gone dead. Law enforcement officials didn't begin searching for Daniel until the third day he'd gone missing. They searched for him within a 2.5-mile radius for a total of 2 hours. Yes, you heard me correctly. 2 hours. The second official search would take place on July 9th, nearly 3 weeks later. And the sole reason this search was conducted was simply because Daniel's father, David, requested to have the Civil Air Patrol go out and scan the area. You would have thought they would have done that the first day they did the search. You would have thought they had the helicopters and everyone out there, but apparently you have to be told to do that. Now, the third search wasn't conducted until nearly 1 month after Daniel's disappearance, and that search was initiated because his vehicle had been found. On Tuesday, July 19th, nearly 1 month after his disappearance, a rancher found Daniel's Jeep in a ravine near his property. It had severe damage to it and was located on its side with the airbags deployed. Police found Daniel's phone, his personal laptop, and his keys. Daniel's clothing, along with the vest he was said to have been wearing the day he went missing, was also found a few feet outside of the vehicle, turned inside out, most of them piled together, and it appeared that one sock was missing. Yet, they determined there was no evidence of foul play. It's just been a hot mess, but we'll get to that. When David asked about why his son's case was not suspicious enough to consider foul play, the police suggested that maybe Daniel didn't want to be found. They offered a theory that maybe he ran off to join a monastery or something, or maybe he had a head injury and just kind of stumbled out of the vehicle and found a tree to rest under. I mean, it was just, I don't know. The following day, law enforcement contacted Daniel's father, and they threatened that if he didn't have the vehicle removed from that property, that they were going to have it towed and he would be responsible for the fees. Now, of course, David is not even from Arizona, so it was going to take him a while. He's like, I don't know anybody here. I don't know any tow truck companies. Can I get a few days? That just came off as so rude and inconsiderate. And on top of that, he's thinking, why aren't you guys taking my son's case seriously? What's going on here? This is a potential crime scene, and you want me to have the vehicle towed, and you don't think there's any chance there's foul play?
People don't just disappear into thin air.
True.
Does that sort of feel like what's happened to here?
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very challenging case.
No matter how much the family asks for this to be a criminal investigation, can you make that happen?
We can't make up evidence. Absolutely suspicious circumstances related to the case.
If you look at the photo, which was taken by the Buckeye Police Department, you'll notice there are no crime scene markers anywhere. They didn't even try. One thing that stood out as well was no one phoned David to inform him on the day the vehicle was actually found. They waited until the next morning to call him. And when he asked why no one called him right away, he was told they didn't want to disturb his sleep. How thoughtful.
They didn't tell me about my son's vehicle until over 24 hours later that it was found.
So if you pay attention to the police report and the information on the website that the police have put up as far as the dates in which they have allegedly done searches and all of this investigating on Daniel's behalf, you will find that a lot of it does not match. It does not add up. And apparently that's become a major issue in this case. A lot of misinformation going around because of that. So let me fill in the gaps for you on what hasn't all been highlighted, because there are so many red flags in this case that I just can't keep up. Some of this information I don't have solid dates on, but the facts have been validated by statements that I gathered from David's interviews and his personal Q&A sessions. So let's go over the facts. Now, of course, we already know that David wasn't settled on the idea that his son's case was not considered a criminal investigation. There were no fingerprints taken at the scene of the accident, and there was no initial forensic work done. After having the vehicle towed so that it could be analyzed, David continued to conduct his own searches with his team of volunteers. What I didn't mention is that Chief Hall unexpectedly showed up to one of David's searches, which was surprising because, like I said before, he's been very evasive since the start of this entire investigation. He asked the group if they wanted to see where the vehicle had been found. Now, up until that point, David had not been shown the exact location of that crash site. So, of course, everyone said yes and wanted to see where this crash site was exactly. Chief Hall decides to walk them over there and show them this location. Well, right about that time is when The rancher, remember, he's the one that actually found the vehicle and called it in. He showed up with his wife and basically said, no, that is not the location. And he takes the group to the area where it was found, which David then recognized because the glass was still there. And after the rancher shows them this area, Chief Hall disappears, gets in his vehicle, and he leaves. It's obvious that he didn't show up to help with the search effort. And the fact that he decided that he wanted to show this group where the crash site was, but it wasn't the right area, is very suspicious in my opinion. The police department returned Daniel's clothing items and belongings over to David, but were marked for safekeeping. Usually this is done when a person is expected to pick up their belongings, but if it is an evidence bag and it's marked as evidence, that means that it is going to be processed at some point in the investigation. So pretty much that was just confirmation that the police department never had any intentions of conducting an investigation because they didn't even mark it as evidence. David also found out that Daniel's phone was actually placed in the back pocket of one of the detectives that processed the crash site. His name is Detective Biffin, and that didn't sit well with David either. Why would you put it in your back pocket? Why wouldn't you put it in an evidence bag? And he was very bothered by that. When that phone was returned to him, the SIM card was missing and there were text messages that had been deleted. From the start, David questioned any and everybody who was known to be with Daniel on or around June 23rd. When he questioned Ken Elliott, remember the co-worker from the well site who allegedly was the last person to see Daniel before he went missing? Well, he was given a slightly different story than what was given to police initially. And this guy said things that were, in my opinion, eerily odd. I don't know. He told David that he painted some rocks with red paint to help authorities follow the direction of Daniel's tire tracks so that whenever they came back to do their investigation and search for Daniel, they would be able to find it easily. But he also said that he did that because he knew that this was going to be a big case and that there would be lots of police and media involved. Now, how would you know that? What would make you say something like that? Well, to me, that was very strange. That was just odd. And I don't know. I just feel like, to me, it would have stood out as a major red flag. And of course, David relayed this information to the Buckeye Police Department. It never made it into the police report. So of course, as David's going off, asking his own questions and trying to pick up new leads and making the connections that he needs to, he discovers a lot of information while he's doing his own investigation. But one discovery that puzzles him to this day is one that he made about Daniel's co-worker, Ken Elliott. On the morning of June 23rd, Daniel was scheduled to work at 2 well sites, not just that one. After finishing up at the first well site, he then called Ken Elliott to let him know he was going to meet up with him. Only he wasn't too familiar with the area, so he was going to have to follow him to that location. And apparently the two agreed to meet at the junction near Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road. And from there, Daniel was able to follow him in to the right location of the well site. So remember, when David questioned Ken about the day of Daniel's disappearance, he was very forthcoming. He gave him a lot of information. He even told him more than what he told the police at first. And like I said, that never made it into the police report. Now, of course, to David and to anybody else, he probably just appeared to be so helpful. When you're out and you're looking for your son, you just want to find your child. You're not thinking anything nefarious is going on. It's probably not one of the first things on your mind. You want the information so you could follow it. And of course, that's what David was doing. He was taking in every lead he could so that he could go out and find his son. It would be any parent's priority. And Ken is just being so helpful. He's giving all this information. I mean, he was giving a lot of detail, going out of his way to mark Daniel's tire tracks so that he could help law enforcement when they got there. I mean, this guy even told David that he got in his own vehicle and traveled in that same direction that he saw Daniel head off and wanted to see if he could spot his Jeep. So he made sure he stayed to the left of Daniel's tire tracks because he didn't want to disturb them. Traveled up to a T-junction, continued following the tire tracks up to a gate, and went about another mile or so, then got out of the vehicle, walked up to this hill, and looked to see if he could spot Daniel in the distance. I mean, according to him, he just was going out of his way to make sure that he could do everything he could for his coworker. But it's what he didn't do that puts a question mark on everything, and it just makes his actions even more questionable. This coworker did all that, and he never once picked up his phone to call Daniel. No text, no call. That would have been the first thing I would have done, but he didn't do that. And to me, that right there says so much more than what it doesn't say. He never once called Daniel's phone. And this was confirmed once David was able to go through Daniel's phone records. He could see that Daniel communicated with Ken early that morning via text, and they also had one brief phone call, and that was probably when they were getting ready to meet up with each other. But then after that, nothing. Does it make any sense that you would get in your vehicle and drive to try and find this person without at first picking up the phone to see where they might be? I'm just so disappointed. But I would be very interested in knowing why he did that. Remember the strange comment that he made when he said he just knew that this was going to make national news and that it was going to be all over? Well, why would you say that? When you start putting all of these things together that don't really add up, it really starts to make you wonder what this coworker of his is hiding. So another important detail to note is the rancher's account of when he found that vehicle. The rancher found the vehicle in that ravine, and that was about 10 days after law enforcement had allegedly conducted this extensive aerial and ground search. The rancher told David that he had been out in that ravine a few days prior searching for his cattle, and he said that Jeep was not there. And according to David, he was pretty adamant about it. He said that if that Jeep had been out there before he found it, his cows would have been all over it because they like to get the salt off of it. There was, I think, 1 or 2 cases of water in the back of the vehicle. And he was certain that if those cows got a hold of that, they would have demolished that water. Because remember, the sunroof was open and the glass was broken by that point, so they would have had easy access to get to it. Most of Daniel's clothes were outside of the vehicle in a pile, but if the cows were to get a hold of them, they would have been scattered all over the place, and more than likely they would have been shredded, but they weren't. And just to give context to the rancher's account, I did a little research myself, and I learned that cows and moose and other animals like that, they do have a habit of licking salt off cars. They do what's called a mineral lick, also called a salt lick. And that's when animals lick essential minerals from salt deposits found on random objects. Road salt found on vehicles is very rich in nutrients because it contains potassium, calcium, and magnesium. It's actually such a common thing in Canada that people refer to the moose there as the Rocky Mountain Car Wash. I found that it's just a very predictable behavior in cattle and such animals. So honestly, guys, if you take into account what the rancher says about not seeing the vehicle beforehand, and also there not being any concrete evidence that that July 9th aerial search ever really took place, it makes you really, really believe in the likelihood that that vehicle was actually placed there. As I go on, you're going to realize there's more and more and more that have just been dropped in as time went along. And it makes you wonder what's really going on. Another eyewitness came forward and said he saw Daniel in that desert the day he went missing. This particular individual claimed to be a federal agent and said he was out in the desert doing target practice with his children. He said he spoke with Daniel and that he appeared to be cleaning out his Jeep. He also said that Daniel seemed to be very pleasant. Daniel told him that he might not want to shoot in that area because it was his work area. And that's when he said that Daniel suggested a better place that would be a lot safer for him to go practice. Allegedly, that was the end of the conversation before they parted ways. This man spoke with McGrath, who was the private investigator on the case at the time, and also gave his eyewitness account to the Buckeye Police Department. So it appears that the federal agent's story raises questions as well. For one, if it is true that that morning, Daniel actually had to call Ken so that he can meet up with him and follow him to the right location of that well site because he wasn't familiar with the area, then how the hell would he know where to go shoot target practice? To me, it just doesn't seem likely that he would be confused as to where to go work, but know where he could go shoot target practice in that same area. I don't know, that's very strange to me. That's a little odd. Also, if he was gonna clean out his Jeep, why would he drive off into the distant desert where there's all kinds of dust and dirt everywhere? What I found to be the most alarming red flag of all is that this man turned out not to be a federal agent and actually at one point recanted ever saying that. Whoa. First of all, why would you say that? Especially knowing that you could be questioned by law enforcement, unless you either have a unique relationship with law enforcement or you're trying to cover something up. Or maybe you're trying to silence somebody. You guys let me know what you think. I've been wrecking my brain around this whole case since I heard it, and I just can't let it go. One theory that I came up with, I don't know, but it's just one theory that I have. I know there are many things that could have happened with this case, but this one I just can't let go for some reason. What if perhaps Daniel did leave and drive in another direction? What if Daniel drove to an area where he actually caught a stray bullet by this man who was out target practicing? And what if that is the cause of that initial crash? Say he caught a stray bullet and he ran off into some brush or something, and then this person realizes that he shot someone. Is it unfathomable to think that maybe he panicked and tried to hide Daniel's body? You know, according to David and according to a lot of other people, that desert is very quiet. So if someone was out shooting within a few miles, chances are you would be able to hear that. What if this guy realizes that his coworker is out there, or maybe the coworker went and looked for him and ran into this guy as well, but this guy claims to be a federal agent and tells him, hey, I'm gonna need you to keep your mouth shut, and that scares him into not saying anything. That silences him. Who knows? But if he really did believe that in the first place, that might explain where this other guy comes from and why his story doesn't really make a lot of sense. It might explain, even if this coworker stumbled upon this guy after realizing that maybe he shot Daniel. Maybe he threatened him. Obviously, he had a weapon. And who's to say that there were children with him? He said he was out target practicing with his children. Does that mean they were minors? It could have been adults. Who's to say they were his children? That's information that we don't really have right now, but that would explain how he could have had someone else drive Daniel's vehicle away from the scene and buy some time. Because, like I said, law enforcement didn't search for Daniel for 3 days. So if no one was out looking for Daniel until that third day, there was a lot of time to conceal a vehicle. There was a lot of time to hide evidence. There was a lot of time to figure out how they were going to get this vehicle back out there and stage a scene. We don't know how many minors or adults were out with this man. We just know that according to him, he was not alone. Maybe he admitted to seeing Daniel just in case his fingerprints showed up on the vehicle or somewhere. Maybe he could say then, oh yeah, I ran up on him and then we were talking and he told me that I could go here and shoot and be a lot safer. I don't know, guys. David also questioned the gentleman who was sent to replace Daniel at that same well location. He was said to be working at that well site on the same day the police said they were out doing aerial searches. He couldn't recall seeing a helicopter, which I find very strange because I think that that's something that you kind of can't miss.
Because also in that conversation with the man at the well site, I asked him, I said, look, I said, have you been here all week? He said, yeah, he's been there since my son went missing. He'd been there every day, all day, working on that well. And I said, okay, well, good. You was out here when the Buckeye Police Department showed up to do a search. They had the helicopters and everything. And he said, well, I personally didn't see it, and that run a real hard bell to me. Like, okay, but this department lying to me and my family, because why is this man saying he didn't hear or see the Buckeye Police Department that day? They came out there with a helicopter looking for my son, and they came to the well site to look for my son. That was a red flag to me, because this guy said he did not hear. He said, I personally didn't hear or see these helicopters. If he's at the well site, it's impossible to see officers pull up on you in front of you unless they had a cloaking device on. And he didn't see the officers there looking for my son in that area, and he didn't hear any helicopters flying overhead. And that desert is quiet. I took my best friend out there. I hope you don't mind me mentioning his name, but he was out here for the candlelight vigil, and he also went out there in that desert with me. And at times I would tell him, we went to go visit the crash site, and I told him to sit still and to stay there quiet. And I can tell you out there in that desert, it is super quiet. It's so quiet, as a city guy, it bothers me because like I could hear, tinnitus, as you call it. It's really loud, really bad. It's so quiet. It's very quiet. I mean, it's eerie quiet out there in the desert. And if it's helicopters or anything flying out there, you can hear it.
But his account of not seeing it really aligns more with the fact that there were a lot of things that were found by the search team that were not found by the police department. During a search effort conducted by David and his team, a human skull was found just a few feet away from the crash site. Now, this happened after law enforcement allegedly thoroughly searched that crash area via ground and air patrol. I just find it odd that it was found that close to where the vehicle was found and not one person in law enforcement noticed it. But you got volunteers who were just out walking, line searching, and they found a human skull feet away from that vehicle. You would have thought that they would have started at the crash site and worked their way out. David also found out that someone from Daniel's job had been calling the rancher, asking to get copies of the photos that he took of the vehicle the day it was found. Of course, he was leery of whatever motive they had, and the rancher decided that he was just going to err on the side of caution and give those photos to David instead, and that's what he did. David has since reached out numerous times, asking for help, asking for resources. He requested equipment such as cadaver dogs. He requested drones. He wanted to have the wells in that area searched, but it would take nearly 7 months before any action was taken. And when it wasn't. Let me just put it that way. And I say that because whenever David finally got someone from the police department to come out, they always came empty-handed or short or didn't have what he asked for. So it was just like, what are you here for? They always came without cameras, no dogs or drones, and it was frustrating. The wells weren't searched for 7 months. 7 months after Daniel's disappearance. And when they were searched, When the technician did come out, the one that was sent by the police department, they came out with cameras that couldn't even go down in the water. And these wells reach as far down in the earth as 600 feet, 1,000 feet down into the earth. So why did you come if you are going to bring equipment that doesn't even work? What help did that do? I'm confused as to why that was okay and as to why it's okay to just come half-assed. It's like you didn't even try. I don't know. I just feel like the department is taking this case as a joke. Also, when they brought the cadaver dog out, David just asked, is the dog certified? And they told him yes, that the dog was certified. He requested a copy of the certification, and so far he's yet to receive that. David also requested to have his case reviewed by the FBI. He wrote a letter and submitted it to Chief Hall. When Chief Hall finally got back to him, he told David that he'd been in contact with the FBI and they were going to set up a case review. And David thanked him for securing that appointment and asked him to follow up with him because he wanted to be there. He wanted to be at that meeting so he could tell them everything that happened and give them the details about what has been going on with the disappearance of his son. And he was very excited about that. He was so happy, y'all. Right after that, he spoke about it at a press conference that he held. And he was just saying how excited he was that he was finally getting some help, that he was finally getting the FBI involved in this. I mean, he had this renewed hope after all the time that had passed. Little did he know, a while later, after growing anxious, he would be contacted by one of the chief's deputies and told that the meeting with the FBI had already taken place without him, and that the FBI would not be picking up his son's case. When David asked why, he was told that the FBI said he was doing such a great job on his own that he didn't need them. That's exactly what he was told. David requested footage from traffic cameras in that area, and he was told that he couldn't get access. They needed a warrant. Why they didn't want to just get a warrant, no one knows. He also requested video footage from a Waffle House Daniel was said to have been at. Instead of providing him with the footage from that surveillance camera, he was given a still shot photo taken from the surveillance camera. I don't know, y'all. To me, it just sounds like something is being hidden. It just sounds like there's so much more to this case. David has resorted to relying on donations and his own personal funds to finance his son's investigation. He's paid for his own private investigator, equipment needed to navigate that desert, forensics analysis, for that vehicle and for the clothing. He's had to secure his own experts and people that are willing to assist him in whatever ways they can. He really is having to do all of this footwork. And this is something that our tax dollars pay for. He shouldn't have to pay for any of this. Yet he is literally draining his funds and relying on donations to make this search effort happen. He even started the process of having surrounding wells inspected using his own money. Though he shouldn't have to do that, but it was necessary in order to get the ball rolling. He had no other choice. And as a result, the well companies, they get to have a free well inspection because obviously he's paying for it. But it allows David to have those cameras down into the well, have the well searched, and to alleviate the possibility that Daniel might be down inside one of them. Things weren't adding up, and the family decided to take matters into their own hands. They hired Jeff McGrath, a private investigator who is also an accident reconstructionist and retired police officer. And for those of you who don't know, an accident reconstructionist is an expert who uses a scientific approach to examine how and why an accident occurred. When McGrath decided to look into the case, he said the Buckeye Police Department turned Daniel's vehicle and all of the evidence pertaining to his case over to him and his team, something he said he never experienced in his entire career in law enforcement or as a private investigator. He said their reasoning was that they didn't feel like they had a criminal case, so they didn't have an investigation. The family shared with McGrath the details of the Jeep and the black box GPS that was recovered from it as well. He immediately discovered major discrepancies while comparing the police report to his own findings. For one, McGrath wasn't too sure about how or why the police would determine there was no foul play. According to the police report, the Jeep had undergone significant damage consistent with front impact that caused it to roll. The front window was shattered, and there was substantial damage to the lower front as well as the windshield and roof. McGrath was uncertain about the police suggested roll theory, though, which made him dig a little deeper into the investigation of the car. According to the black box, he was able to determine that the vehicle was traveling about 30 miles an hour before the airbags deployed. This raised a red flag for McGrath, who then used his own vehicle to see if that speed was even possible on such rugged, rough terrain. And he determined that it wasn't. He also said as soon as he saw the photos of how the vehicle was found, he immediately felt like it was staged. Information from its GPS data showed the Jeep had been in multiple accidents before it finally fell down into that ravine. It revealed that once the vehicle crashed and the airbags deployed, that it was driven an additional 11 miles. Following that 11 miles, it was involved in yet another crash. Strangely, that first crash occurred nearly 4 hours after Daniel was last seen, according to the data. McGrath also found that once the airbags deployed, the ignition was turned over 46 times during that additional 11 miles.
What are the discrepancies that you noticed right away?
I believe it was in more than one collision.
What does the data from the black box of the car tell you?
That there was 11 additional miles on the vehicle since the airbags came out.
What does that tell you?
That tells me it was crashed somewhere else.
A front impact car accident, often referred to as a head-on collision, occurs when the front end of two vehicles collide into each other. Although head-on collisions are not as frequent as rear impact or side impact collision, the front impact collision often involves fatalities. So when I first heard the term front impact, I automatically just assumed that what they meant by that was that when you are to look at Daniel's vehicle in the condition that it's in, that what you are seeing is a visual of what is consistent with damage that you might see in other vehicles that sustained collision damage to the front of the vehicle. So to reference, I looked at vehicles of similar make and model, and this is what I found. Now, all these Jeeps are the result of accidents involving front end collisions, most of which you can see the damage. You can tell by looking at the front of the vehicle that there was some type of impact, some type of collision with another vehicle or into something. However, though I do agree that there's some damage to the front lateral part of Daniel's vehicle, I just don't see damage that aligns with what in my mind equates to a type of collision that was so powerful that it caused the vehicle to in turn roll, right? Honestly, I would think that the initial impact that would cause a vehicle to actually roll over would be extremely powerful and would just mess the front end of that Jeep up. Obviously, I'm no expert. I'm not claiming to be an expert. I'm not claiming to know anything about vehicles or anything like this. This is just my opinion, okay? I will repeat, this is my opinion from what I see with my own eyes and from the research that I've gathered. It just doesn't match the report to me. We're supposed to question what we see. And if something doesn't add up, we need to keep asking questions until it does make sense to us. You don't just accept whatever somebody tells you. At the end of the day, law enforcement and, these so-called experts, everybody's human. So despite what you're being told, if it doesn't make sense, you got to ask questions until it makes sense, which is why we have to get sometimes second and third evaluations. You can't go off what people say all the time. Sometimes people have ulterior motives and they don't always tell you the facts. All I'm saying is, from the outside looking in, something's wrong. All right, so let's talk about the rolling over of this vehicle. Now, did it flip over on its side or did it roll? Because that's my question. Clearly it's not upright, so something happened. I don't see damage consistent with a roll. Let me show you what I mean. Let's start with the roof of this vehicle. It doesn't even look scratched or damaged at all. Look at the rack side rails on top. I would think that a vehicle that would have rolled over in any way would have rails that would be cracked, they'd be broken, they'd be bent. There would be some type of indication that the vehicle landed on those racks at some point in time. I would at least expect to see some scratches or some dirt, especially considering that this is supposed to be a vehicle that was sitting in the desert for a month. The roof of this vehicle appears to be in such good condition to have rolled on top of it. Also, notice the two impressions on the windshield. They're both dented inward, and at first glance, I was like, I'm not sure what to make of that. I needed some more information. So I visited IIHS website, which is the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They're a very, very prominent nonprofit organization, and they're funded by auto insurance companies to do research and evaluations on vehicles for consumer safety. They've been around since 1959 and have a pretty solid reputation. And I would assume so, being that insurance companies are relying on that information to process claims. What this company does is they perform safety tests on vehicles so that they can provide safety consumer reports, and they give these vehicles ratings on different functionalities, and they come up with what's called a safety consumer report. And these reports are made available to the public and also the insurance companies. One of the tests they perform is a rollover crash test. And this is done to check the strength of a vehicle's roof. So take a look at this. This is a machine designed to apply pressure to the roof of a vehicle, assimilating what would happen if that vehicle were to roll over. I had a look at two Jeeps of the same make and model. One is a 2015 and the other is a 2019. One thing I noticed is how much pressure is actually required before the windshield gets to the point of buckling, and that's quite a bit. The largest indentation that you'll see to the damage of that windshield is created only after the exterior of the Jeep frame is compromised. From what I gather, it appears that the frame has to be bent in order for the pressure pushing down on the windshield to create that type of indentation from a rollover. All right, so if you take a look at Daniel's vehicle, there's no bend on the frame. There's no impression or indentation of the vehicle that is great enough to have caused that windshield to pressurize and bust or to crumble in the way that it has. Like, there's nothing up here. You see a little bit of scrapes, and yes, it could have rolled, but I'm wondering if the vehicle went through something prior to being staged and set up in that way. So what am I saying? I'm suggesting that maybe the indentation on that windshield could have been caused by an object striking it. I even pulled footage. I was like, you know what? Okay, let me satisfy my theory here. What does it look like when the windshield of a vehicle is actually struck by an object, like say a bat or any type of object that maybe creates enough force to shatter it like that? And this is what I came up with, y'all. Okay, moving on. Now, you ready for the most bizarre part of this entire story? That vehicle was found a little over 2.5 miles or so from the work site where Daniel was last seen, an area that had allegedly already been searched by the Buckeye Police Department and a local search team. McGrath also found red paint transfer on the vehicle, and no one knows where that came from. Police didn't decide to do their own investigation until November, months after McGrath had already done his. Don't forget that during this time, McGrath is the one in possession of the vehicle. This GPS black box that the police used to download their data from, this is the same black box that McGrath used. It's the same information. So I'm so confused as to why it was necessary to spend money and hire another investigator to investigate using the same tools. Yet they still disputed McGrath's findings, stating in their report that the car attempted to drive up the other side of the ravine and rolled. And they also argued the validity of those additional 11 miles, saying similar discrepancies have been made and noted by the Jeep dealership service departments and other crash reconstructionists.
So what explains that?
Well, we had the national expert that came in and provided us his findings, and then they ended up speaking to an expert at Jeep, and the expert says, yes, sometimes that happens, and it's not unusual.
The police also said that the vehicle accelerated right before the crash, but according to McGrath, there was no evidence suggesting that. He also said that since it takes a combined analysis of both the electronic data and the physical inspection of the vehicle itself, he was unsure how the hell the police could come up with the final analysis about anything, since no one from the police department had contacted him and asked to even see the vehicle. He's had it the entire time. He was so frustrated by the timing of this whole report, because to him, the police opened up that investigation for one reason and one reason only, and that was to dispute his findings. They didn't want to find out what happened to Daniel. He genuinely felt as though they just didn't care. And he expressed his concerns about the lack of support from the police department, stating, and I quote, "That's concerning. They just don't want to look bad," end quote.
I have turned all of my information over to the Buckeye police detectives because I wanted them to step up their investigation. Unfortunately, when I went to go out and process the vehicle the first time when it was still in Buckeye's possession, they turned it over to us through Mr. Robinson and said, their exact words said, "We don't have an investigation, we're done. We don't have a crime and we don't have anything to investigate." So they've turned everything over to us. I currently have all of that, what should have been marked evidence and should still be in their evidence lockers for review. But as we go through all of it, we just keep finding more and more. And I sat down with the Buckeye Police Department and detectives, lieutenants and assistant chief, and explained to them my findings. And all they want to do is brush me off. They don't want my information. And we've been trying to put pressure on them from day one. And this is unacceptable. If this were my child, their child, anybody else's child, I believe especially if it was their child, I believe they'd step up their investigation. But for this, they look at this as a young black man that they believe just wanted to disappear and join a monastery. Absurd. It's absolutely absurd what they believe.
It was evident that the police department and McGrath needed to just come together, sit down, take a fresh look at all of the evidence and everything. They could exchange theories and take it from there. You would think that would be a no-brainer, right? Because as a private investigator, I'm on your side. But no, I guess it wasn't that simple. McGrath set out to meet with Buckeye Police Chief Lee Hall on several occasions, but he said he did not show up to a scheduled meeting and did not want to meet with him since. After the police decided to open up their own investigation, it became nearly impossible for anyone to get answers. It's as if the police department kind of subtly shut down as much as they could without it being so blatant. McGrath had also been very vocal about he and David's findings. He said that most of the findings in the police report have been due to their own footwork. And even David said he felt like he was doing all the work for the police. David has not left the state of Arizona since he got there on June 26th. And at the time of the recording of this video, it's March. He is adamant that he is there to find his son or find out what happened to his son. And he's not leaving until he figures it out, which frustrates me even more because I feel like he is not getting the help that he needs. I feel like the pushback from law enforcement is uncalled for, it's unnecessary, it's disgusting, it's just unfathomable. I can't even wrap my mind around why. But obviously, he learned early on he wasn't going to get much support from the police department. So, he took matters into his own hands and he started doing work himself. And a lot of it. He and his family put together several searches and are still putting together searches, scouring the extremely hot and sometimes unbearable Arizona desert in hopes to find Daniel. He's recruited volunteers and has led search parties with as many as 80 to 200 people at a time. He created a website with a map of the desert broken down into grids to help navigate his search efforts. And the website is very detailed and well put together with all the information you need about Daniel, about resources and ways to help. There's even a message board for people to provide tips and to communicate with each other. I'm very impressed by the work this man is able to do himself and with volunteers. Just to give you a little more background information on David Robinson, he is an Army veteran. So one of the things that he said that really stood out to me as a fellow veteran is when he talked about his experience having a battle buddy.
Battle buddies are more effective than an individual soldier. They provide mutual protection and help maintain accountability.
Battle buddy is important because it just teaches you that you're not in this alone. This veteran fought for this country and deployed on missions when you don't know if you're coming home.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Robinson again. I was just sitting here thinking about how it's been 8 months, going on 9 months since my son went missing, and I have yet to get any real attention from law enforcement, taking my son's case seriously. I was sitting here thinking, how many families going through the same thing my family going through, same fathers going through what I'm going through, trying to find out my son or loved one. We have to take a stand. That's why I'm asking you guys to come out this Saturday in numbers, so we can, just make a statement. Hey, we can't be doing this, especially a state like Arizona with high cases missing of people. My son represent missing people. My family represent families of missing people. And we make a statement. So please, you guys, go to pleasehelpfinddaniel.com under the events tab, and please help me make a statement. I really appreciate it, guys, for all your help and all your love. I love you for that. Thank you. God bless you.
He said, the military has taught me that no man gets left behind. No man. Yet, after serving this country and retiring as a disabled veteran, you want to leave his son behind. This country wants to leave his son behind. He can't even get resources. He can't even get you to pick up the phone and talk to him. This country is willing to leave this man's son behind. That bothers me. That really bothers me. What a slap in the face. What a way for your country to tell you that you're disposable, and despite everything you've done for this country, we don't give a shit about you. What a way to show your appreciation. Not I can't do my job, I don't want to. That's what you're saying. You're not saying I can't, you're saying I don't want to. Let me calm down so I can finish telling the story. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, David has been doing a lot of work. He has been doing everything he can, leaving no stone unturned. He is not leaving his son behind. He's been on every show you can think of. Dr. Oz, Roland Martin Unfiltered. He's reached out to the Black and Missing Foundation. He's reached out to Joy Reid when he couldn't get her. Like, he'll talk about how he's reached out to people and he couldn't even get them to respond back because of whatever reason. Some people are just busy and they don't respond right away. But he'll tell you, I'll reach out to your friends. This man is not going to quit. He's knocking on every door. He has been on the Red Table Talk, CNN. He's doing the work. And despite the lack of support from law enforcement, we're going to have to pull together and just link arms as a community to show this family that we're not going to give up on Daniel. We're able to do this. We can put in the work from anywhere you live in this world. You can still put in work. You can spread content. You can spread flyers. You can donate. There's so many things that we all can do, and collectively we can just come together because we do have each other. And as long as we have each other, we have a chance. And I say make noise until we make change. Make enough noise until we make change. But we cannot give up on this family. We cannot give up on Daniel, because this could be any of us. Daniel could be our son, our cousin, our brother. So we got to stand together as a nation of battle buddies who will do whatever it takes and really put in this footwork. All right, y'all. In part 2, we're going to take a deeper look into law enforcement and more details concerning this case. Then we'll do a breakdown of the chronological timeline from beginning until now. So for more information on ways to help, see details below this video. If you haven't yet, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, and then head on over to part 2. Thank you so much for watching.